For the longest time, the story of human origins felt, well, pretty straightforward, didn't it? We had this picture, you know, a single cradle of humanity.
Right, somewhere in East Africa.
Exactly. Maybe around 200,000 years ago. That was the established narrative. But what if I told you that new discoveries aren't just tweaking that idea? They're basically ripping up the old script and rewriting the first chapters of our species story.
It's absolutely true. The picture that's emerging now of how Homo sapiens came about and spread out, it's so much more complex, more dynamic, really interconnected in ways we just didn't imagine before.
Yeah, the whole narrative is shifting, isn't it? From that single point to something much bigger, like woven across the entire continent.
A continent-wide phenomenon almost.
And that's exactly what we want to delve into today. Our mission, if you will, is to navigate this fascinating new timeline. We want to understand the big finds that are causing these shifts, these paradigm shifts, really.
And explore some of the surprising things our earliest ancestors were doing, their migrations.
Right.
It's quite a story.
So let's unpack it. Let's see how profoundly things have changed. Our journey really kicks off with a truly remarkable discovery, one that just completely flipped decades of belief about where and when we first became, well, us.
You're talking about Jebel Irhoud.
Jebel Irhoud, exactly. A site in Morocco back in the 60s, miners, just regular miners in a barite mine, stumble across a human skull. Can you even picture that?
Just finding a skull in a cave wall purely by chance. Amazing.
And eventually, it made its way to scientists. But the initial interpretation is really key here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, because those fossils and the tools found with them, quite sophisticated Middle Stone Age tools, actually, made with that Levallois technique.
Rather prepare the stone core first.
Precisely. Very careful preparation to strike off specific flakes. Well, initially, they thought these were North African Neanderthals.
Right. And dated them much younger, like 40,000 years old.
Exactly. But even back then, there were some puzzling contradictions. Some features just looked a bit too modern for Neanderthals. The site kind of remained an enigma for decades.
Okay, so fast forward. 2004. Paleoanthropologist Jean-Jacques Houblon leads a new excavation. A critical one.
Yes, his team spent years, really meticulous work, and they found more human remains, but also, crucially, burnt flint tools.
Burnt tools. And that turned out to be the key, right? The key to unlocking the real age.
The absolute key. Daniel Richter and his team used thermoluminescence dating on those flints.
How does that work again, roughly?
Well, basically, heating resets a kind of geological clock in the stone. By measuring the light emitted when they reheat the samples in the lab, they can tell how long it's been since they were last intensely heated, like in a campfire.
Okay, so they dated the campfire.
Which dates the archaeological layer.
Yeah.
And the results were just stunning. The tools and the human fossils found with them dated to around 315,000 years ago.
315,000. That just blows the old timeline out of the water. It basically doubles the age of Homo sapiens.
Completely. And suddenly, the oldest known Homo sapiens remains weren't in East Africa anymore. They were in Morocco, North Africa.
Wow. And the fossils themselves, the anatomy, what did they tell us?
Also fascinating, because their faces were surprisingly modern. Flat, quite delicate, small cheekbones, even a hint of a chin developing. Their teeth, too, very much in the modern human range.
So if you just saw their face, you might almost
think they look like us, yes. But then you look at the brain case.
Ah, okay.
It was
a different story there.
Very different. It was elongated, sort of low and slightly flattened, not the high, rounded, globular skull shape we have today.
So it's like a mix, a mosaic.
Exactly, a mosaic anatomy. It suggests that the modern facial structure was established really early in our lineage, but the brain shape and potentially its organization and function continued evolving within the Homo sapiens lineage for hundreds of thousands of years after that.
So becoming human wasn't an overnight switch. It was piecemeal.
Piece by piece over a vast time scale. And interestingly, they lacked that prominent bony chin, which is a really distinct feature of fully modern humans. So it's not just the date, it's this whole picture of gradual mosaic evolution.
Okay, so Jebel Irhoud in North Africa, 315,000 years ago. That really shakes up the whole Garden of Eden idea of a single East African origin, doesn't it? What's the biggest takeaway there?
It's fundamental. It gives massive support to a hypothesis Chris Stringer proposed back in 2002. He suggested Homo sapiens didn't just pop up in one place.
Right, the Pan-African origin idea.
Exactly. That our species evolved across Africa. Different populations, interconnected, maybe sometimes isolated, sometimes mixing. Modern features, behaviors, genes emerging in different places and spreading. It's less like a single starting line and more like a continental melting pot, maybe.
And we see hints of this elsewhere too, right?
Hmm.
It's not just Jebel Irhoud in isolation.
Not at all. You look at the Flores bed skull from South Africa. For ages, people debated was it late Homo heidelbergensis, early sapiens? But now, with Jebel Irhoud providing this older timeline,
It fits better as early Homo sapiens.
it makes much more sense to see it as early Homo sapiens, yeah. Dated around 260,000 years ago.
And Homo kibish in Ethiopia, those were the previous record holders.
They were at about 195,000 years old. But even they've been pushed back now, redated to at least 233,000 years old.
So you've got North Africa, South Africa, East Africa, all showing these early sapiens or sapiens-like forms way back.
Right.
It really paints that interconnected picture.
It really does, a widespread evolving network across the continent.
And the climate might have helped connect these regions. I remember reading about a green Sahara.
Absolutely. Paleoclimate data suggests periods when the Sahara wasn't the barrier it often is today. Around 300,000 years ago, there seems to have been one of these wetter, greener phases.
Which would basically open up highways across the desert.
Potentially, yes. Facilitating movement, gene flow, sharing of ideas and technologies between populations in North and Sub-Saharan Africa, it all points towards this Pan-African emergence.
Okay, so we have these anatomically early Homo sapiens spread out.
Hmm.
What about their behavior? What do the sites tell us about how they actually lived? Were they just physically different, or were they acting differently too?
Well, the tools at Jebel Irhoud certainly show sophisticated behavior. That Middle Stone Age toolkit, using the Levallois technique.
The prepared core technique again.
Yes, it requires foresight, planning, skill. These aren't simple tools. We see pointed flakes, likely used as spear tips, other cutting tools, and significantly, it's a clear step beyond the older Acheulean hand axe technology.
Right, those big sort of teardrop-shaped hand axes. This is more refined.
Much more refined. It indicates a real cognitive leap. And it wasn't just the tools.
What else did they find?
Lots of evidence for fire use, abundant charcoal, ash deposits, and animal bones, mostly gazelle, with clear-cut marks from butchering.
So they were hunting.
Hunting, butchering, and importantly, cooking. There were notches on the bones suggesting marrow extraction, and many bones were charred.
Cooking the meat, that makes a huge difference nutritionally.
A massive difference. Controlled use of fire, cooking. It suggests planning, resource management, maybe even cooperative hunting and sharing. These are complex behaviors for such early Homo sapiens.
And they weren't just sticking to their immediate surroundings either.
It seems not. Some of the stone used for the tools wasn't local. They were using high-quality raw materials that must have come from some distance away.
Which implies either they were ranging really far across the landscape.
Or potentially the very beginnings of trade networks exchanging materials. Either way, it suggests they were mobile and connected.
Okay, so the African picture is getting much richer, much older, much more widespread. But the story doesn't stop there, does it? Humans started moving beyond Africa too, and maybe earlier than we thought.
That's another area where things are getting really interesting. Look at Mislia Cave in Israel.
Mislia Cave, what was found there?
An upper jaw fragment with teeth called Mislia 1. And the dating is key. Between about 177,000 and 194,000 years ago.
Wow, nearly 200,000 years ago, outside Africa.
Exactly. That makes it the oldest, undisputed modern human fossil found outside the African continent.
Yep.
It wasn't just a quick failed trip out. It looks like there was a stable population in the Levant much, much earlier than the main out-of-Africa event we usually talk about around 60,000 years ago.
And then there's that site in India, Adirondack.
Yes, Adirondack. That one's a bit of a puzzle. They found stone tools there, also using the Levallois technique.
That advanced method again?
Yes, but dated potentially as far back as 385,000 years ago.
385,000.
Yeah.
But we don't have Homo sapiens fossils that old in India, do we?
No, we don't. So it raises big questions. Who was making those tools? Was it an earlier hominin species that developed the technique independently? Or did some very early form of sapiens or a related group make it that far east, even if we haven't found their fossils yet? It really complicates the picture of technological spread.
It really does. Which leads to this other, almost radical idea. Could migration have gone the other way too, into Africa?
It's a fascinating possibility. Some researchers are suggesting that maybe early populations, perhaps sapiens-like groups from Eurasia, migrated back into Africa.
And mixed with the populations there.
Potentially, yes. Contributing to the genetic pool that we see in later African fossils like Hirtu or Homo kibish. Genetic studies are starting to drop hints about these complex back and forth movements. It wasn't necessarily a one-way street out of Africa.
A constant ebb and flow, maybe?
Possibly. A much more dynamic interaction between continents than the simple out of Africa model allows for.
And some people even speculate about the Persian Gulf playing a role
Hmm.
as more than just a pathway.
That's an intriguing idea. During ice ages, when sea levels were much lower, the Persian Gulf wouldn't have been a sea. It would have been a large, potentially fertile landmass, a river valley system.
The kind of lost world.
Exactly. And some speculate this area could have been a major population center, a hub, maybe a place where different groups met and mixed, and potentially a launch pad for migrations both into Asia and maybe even back into Africa. It's speculative, but it highlights how much our map of early human movements might be missing.
Okay, so let's recap slightly. We've got Homo sapiens emerging perhaps 315,000 years ago, maybe across Africa. They're capable of sophisticated behaviors, using fire, making advanced tools. They even make early forays out of Africa, like to Mislia Cave. But then there seems to be this long gap,
A really long gap.
because the big, successful, permanent expansion of Homo sapiens across the globe doesn't really happen until much later, right? Around 60,000, maybe 50,000 years ago, sometimes called the later Stone Age transition or the onset of behavioral modernity. Why the delay? If they were around and capable for so long, what held them back?
That's one of the biggest questions, really. And there probably isn't one single answer. Environmental barriers were definitely a huge factor.
Like the Sahara again.
The Sahara, yes. For long periods, it would have been a massive desert, incredibly difficult to cross, except during those wetter green Sahara phases we mentioned.
Which were intermittent.
Exactly. And then you have climate in Eurasia. Long, cold glacial periods would have made large parts of Europe and Asia pretty inhospitable for groups adapted to Africa.
So tough environmental conditions.
Yeah.
What else? Was it about their own development? Technology, maybe? Social structures?
That seems likely too. While we see early sparks of complex behavior, like maybe symbolic thought with those burials at Skul and Qafiza in Israel, dated maybe 130,000 to 90,000 years ago.
Those were Neanderthals or early sapiens?
Early Homo sapiens found with shell beads too. So signs of symbolism were there early. But maybe the full package, really advanced toolkits, complex language, fully developed symbolic culture, sophisticated social networks needed for colonizing totally new environments maybe that took longer to fully develop and become widespread.
So they needed the right tools, both physical and cognitive, to really make that global leap.
Precisely. The capabilities needed to survive and thrive in unfamiliar, often harsher environments might have taken time to mature across the species.
And maybe just numbers, population size.
That's almost certainly part of it, too. Early human populations were likely quite small, scattered. You need a certain demographic momentum, enough people, to sustain long-distance migrations and establish new populations.
Is there genetic evidence for that?
Yes, interestingly, studies looking at mitochondrial DNA, which traces the maternal line, suggest a significant population expansion within Africa, particularly in certain lineages, somewhere between about 80,000 and 60,000 years ago.
Right around the time before the big dispersal.
Exactly. So maybe this population boom provided the critical mass needed for that global expansion.
And this population growth seems to coincide with some really cool innovations popping up, especially in southern Africa. Places like Blombos Cave.
Yes, Blombos Cave, Clip Drift Shelter, Deep Kloof Rock Shelter, sites from around, say, 75,000 down to 55,000 years ago show a real flourishing of innovation.
What kinds of things?
We see things like finely made bone tools, including spearheads, maybe even early arrow points, so more advanced hunting gear, evidence for systematic fishing and use of marine resources, engraved ochre, shell beads, clear signs of symbolic activity.
Like art or personal adornment?
Exactly. And things like heat treatment of stone to make better tools, maybe even early forms of managing plant foods. And again, evidence for long-distance transport or exchange of materials, like specific types of stone or ostrich eggshell for making beads.
So all these innovations together might have allowed populations to grow, supported more people.
That's the idea. These technological and social advancements increase their ability to exploit resources, making the environment capable of supporting larger, more stable populations. This leads to that demographic growth seen in the genetics, which then fuels the dispersal out of Africa. They sort of cracked the code for thriving, not just surviving.
So the picture is complex origins, complex behaviors, and a complex reason for the eventual global spread. But it gets even more tangled, doesn't it? This idea that our family tree isn't neat at all.
Oh, absolutely. The old idea of a clean, linear progression where one species neatly replaces another, that's completely gone. It looks much more like a tangled mess, as one researcher aptly put it.
And a great example of that is the Iwo Eliru skull from Nigeria.
A fascinating find. It's only about 13,000 years old, which is very recent in evolutionary terms,
Yeah.
but it looks surprisingly archaic, surprisingly primitive for that age. It doesn't look like other modern humans from that period in Africa.
So what does that suggest?
It strongly suggests that archaic human populations, groups that were not fully modern Homo sapiens, might have survived in some parts of Africa, like West Africa, until relatively recently. And crucially, they were likely interacting, maybe interbreeding, with the modern human populations there.
So no clean replacement, more like coexistence and mixing.
Exactly. It challenges that simple replacement model head on.
And genetics backs this up too, this idea of ghost DNA.
It certainly does. Genetic studies of modern West African populations have found something remarkable. A significant chunk of their genome, anywhere from 2% up to maybe 19%, seems to come from an unknown archaic population.
Unknown, meaning not Neanderthal, not Denisovan.
Exactly. A population that seems to have split off from our ancestors before the split between Neanderthals and modern humans. So maybe 600,000, 700,000 years ago, or even earlier. We don't have fossils of this ghost population yet, but their DNA lives on.
Wow. So archaic humans were contributing to the modern gene pool in Africa too, not just outside Africa with Neanderthals and Denisovans.
Absolutely. Which makes you rethink those Jebel Irhoud fossils again.
How so?
Well, perhaps Jebel Irhoud represents something close to this very early diverging lineage within Homo sapiens, what some call basal modern humans or deep modern humans, maybe populations like the one at Jebel Irhoud or related groups like those associated with the Atarian culture in North Africa.
That's the one with the tang points, right? Tools with stems for hafting.
Yes, that culture lasted a long time, from maybe 150,000 down to 20,000 years ago. Perhaps groups like these were involved in that ancient admixture event that contributed the ghost DNA found in West Africans today. It connects these ancient North African populations to modern genetic diversity in a really intriguing way.
So if we're ditching the neat tree, what are we replacing it with? How should we visualize human evolution now?
Think less of a tree, more of a braided stream or a tangled bush. Lineages constantly splitting, diverging, sometimes dying out, but often rejoining and exchanging genes. Interbreeding wasn't just happening between different Homo sapiens populations. It was happening between Homo sapiens and other hominin species like Neanderthals, Denisovans, and these African ghost populations.
So we're all a product of this ancient intermingling.
To a large extent, yes. This genetic exchange, this promiscuity has shaped who we are today in ways we're really only just starting to fully appreciate. It's a much messier, but also much more interesting story.
Okay, one more region that's getting a rethink is Arabia. For ages, it was just seen as a corridor, right?
Yeah.
A quick hop from Africa to Asia.
Just a land bridge, basically. A necessary but brief stopover.
But that view is changing too.
Dramatically. New research, new archaeological finds are painting Arabia as a really important region in its own right. Not just a corridor, but a place where hominins, including early Homo sapiens, lived for long periods.
Thriving there, not just passing through.
Exactly. There's evidence for lakes, rivers, grasslands during wetter periods, a much more hospitable environment than we might assume. Finds of stone tools, some potentially very old, suggest repeated occupations over hundreds of thousands of years. It might have been a vibrant area, maybe even a melting pot where different groups from Africa and potentially Asia interacted.
A hub rather than just a highway.
A potential hub, yes. Crucial for understanding dispersals, but also potentially a center of evolution and adaptation itself.
And there's even that idea about it being a kind of alternative Garden of Eden.
That's a more speculative but interesting idea focused on the Red Sea coast or the Persian Gulf basin we mentioned earlier.
The Sea of Reeds idea.
Kind of. The theory goes that maybe a diet rich in marine resources, fish and shellfish in these coastal or lakeside environments, might have favored the evolution of a more gracile, slender body type compared to populations relying more on large game hunting.
So suggesting that specific environments outside the traditional East African Rift Valley could have driven key human adaptations.
Precisely. It highlights how different regional environments, even within this broader Afro-Arabian zone, might have shaped our evolution in diverse ways.
So putting it all together, where does this leave us? The story of Homo sapiens is clearly not that simple linear march out of East Africa.
Not at all. It's this dynamic, interwoven tapestry. Multiple populations evolving across a huge continent, Africa. Complex migrations happening sometimes out, sometimes back in, and constant interbreeding, weaving different lineages together.
It's a story that's still being written, really.
Absolutely. Every year, it seems, new discoveries from archaeology and genetics add another layer, another twist. Our species' history is so much richer, so much more interconnected than we ever thought. And honestly, there are probably still huge discoveries waiting in museum drawers in unexcavated sites.
Fossils collected decades ago that haven't been re-examined with new techniques, maybe.
Exactly. Or whole regions where we've barely scratched the surface. We're constantly uncovering more of this ancient puzzle.
It really forces us to keep rethinking who we are and where we came from, which leaves us with a pretty profound question, I think. If our origins are so spread out, so ancient, and so deeply tangled up with other kinds of humans, at what point did we actually become us? When did we truly begin to be human?
That's the question, isn't it? And maybe the answer isn't a single point in time at all.